What's up, guys? It's Nora, and today I'm back to talk with you guys about, obviously, the title of this video, the fact that I've failed my Humira. Now, I did not expect to be making this video as soon as I am. However, things change, and I currently am no longer going to be on Humira. Now, when I say that I failed Humira, usually when somebody fails a biologic or any other drug for that matter, it means that it either stopped working for them, it never worked for them, maybe they became allergic to it or had a reaction to it, and for whatever reason, they are no longer going to be on the drug. In my case, the drug was not working as much as it needed to. I started flaring on my Humira, and so I want to do a little timeline for you guys to show you guys exactly how short I was on the drug, how quickly I flared after I was on it, and also talk about my treatment that I'm going to be doing this point forward. For anyone who doesn't remember, I switched from infliximab or Remicade to Humira, which is like adalimumab or something, I think, back in June. I really had stopped Remicade in May because my insurance company said they were no longer going to cover it. However, I was becoming a hard stick. So doing infusions was kind of putting a lot of stress on my mental health, and every single time I was afraid the two nurses weren't going to be able to get access on me because I have small little baby veins because of my size, and going was just very stressful, and especially if the nurses can't stick you, then you have to go back, and that can screw up your whole schedule. It can make you at more risk to become allergic to the drug, and then also it puts you at risk for flaring. So I didn't love the idea of doing the infusions once I started having a lot of trouble with getting an IV. However, switching to Humira in June was like a godsend because it was perfect timing, and I was fine with doing the injections myself. And I got comfortable with doing the injections. I was fine with it. I'm a nurse. I stick people all the time. And so I was on it from June until now, which is February, the very beginning of February. However, in December, I started to notice, and sorry, TMI for anybody at this point, I started to notice right at Christmas time that I was having more mucus in my stool. However, I was eating like crap. I was eating junk food. I'd been eating junk food since Thanksgiving. It's that time of year, you eat crap. So I kind of played it off as oh, maybe I'm just not really eating that well, and I need to kind of get back on eating well and having more nutritional things than just candy all day long. So I kind of decided to wait a little bit on it to see if I was really going to go into a flare, because I didn't really believe that I was on a flare because I haven't flared since I've been on a biologic. Waited, and it kind of the ending after Christmas, from the end of the year to the beginning of the new year, it kind of went away. To be completely honest, it resolved itself. I went back to normal. I wasn't pooping 2-3 times a day. And I just was okay, whatever, probably was just a little blip or whatever. Didn't think anything twice about it. A week into the new year, I started getting a lot more mucus, going to the bathroom a lot more, and then the second week of January, I had blood in my stool. So that was at the point where I was yeah, I'm definitely flaring. I can't really beat around the bush on this one. I'm definitely flaring on the Humira. So I let my GI know, and he did the typical, let's go through all of the steps and do all the stool samples and everything to make sure that it's actually an immune thing going on, and maybe not, I don't know why, every single time they test me for C. diff, but God forbid I actually had C. diff. I would have been way sicker at this point. I would have been in the hospital at this point, and I knew I didn't have C. diff. However, he likes to do all those things. Also, I want to note that I switched from the GI that I was going to previously because they sucked and they could never get back in contact with me, and I was afraid that, God forbid, I did go into a flare. They are terrible at responding, and it was going to take forever for me to change drugs, and I just didn't like the way they did things. So I switched to one that was closer to me in the same main health network as me, but I haven't been with this doctor. I've only been with the doctor since July. So I haven't been with him that long. And I also haven't had a flare with any of my adult GI doctors. So it was kind of a new experience to see what they did, because my pediatric GI was very on top of things, very up to date with all the research, knew all the drugs, extremely smart person, and I absolutely adored her. So to start flaring with a different doctor was a little oh, let's see what he's gonna do. We did all the stool tests. Sure enough, I was flaring. So then we did the trough levels, which is the level of the drug in your body, and I did a blood test right before I did my very last injection that I just previously did, and it turns out that I had adequate amounts of Humira in my bloodstream, and so that means that I failed the drug. I had enough Humira in my body that should be at a therapeutic level, but I still was flaring. And I kind of thought long and hard about this because I could tell that the inflammation was all in my rectum, which, again, sorry TMI, but my colitis always, my entire life, has mostly been in my rectum, besides the very last time that I flared and was in the hospital. That was my entire colon, like, went crazy, but I'd never had my entire colon be so inflamed. It was really only, that rectum, the sigmoid part, and then right at the junction where it goes from my small intestine to my large intestine. Those were like the key areas. However, I noticed with this flare I wasn't having little to any pain in my stomach, which was super weird, and it was really only surrounded me needing to go to the bathroom. I've been going to the bathroom a lot, and there's mostly been blood and mucus. Which is, like, again, the weird part is, like, usually had I not been on Humira, I would have already at this point been hospitalized. It kind of clicked for me one day of, like, oh, like, definitely the Humira is doing something. And when I was doing the injections, the 2 last ones, I definitely saw improvement in my symptoms for 3 or 4 days. However, after that, my symptoms just came back. Excuse the brief interruptions. My SD card just decided to, like, corrupt itself in the middle of filming, and all of a sudden ran out of space. So back to what we were talking about. My doctor and I spoke about possibly doing Humira and the immune modulators because that's an option that I know people have done in the past. However, he was not a fan of that. What he wanted, which I think was a stupid idea, just to put it out there, I did not agree with what he was saying. He wanted me to have a few more years with the Humira, and he wanted me to just do a colonoscopy, see how really bad it was. He kept saying that. I wanted to be like, well, the inflammation's just in my rectum. Like, I can tell you that right now, or else my entire stomach would be hurting. And it's really not, which is totally weird. But thank you, Humira. Usually my flares are much worse, and I have much more stomach pain. But he was like, yeah, we'll do a colonoscopy now, see how bad it really is, and then we'll just put you on prednisone because, you know, you're gonna flare on the biologics. And I was like, well, you shouldn't. If you're on biologics, they should be knocking your immune system down enough to the point where you're not flaring. That's the point of the biologics, is to treat you so you don't flare. Because every single time you flare, you're at a higher risk for developing colon cancer, as well as you damage your colon more to the point where you're getting closer and closer down that line of possibly losing your colon. When he said that, I was like, you want me to have a few more years with Humira? I'm sorry, what? He was like, yeah, I want you to have a few more years, so every single time you flare, which is normal on the biologics, we'll just do steroids. And I was like, no, that doesn't even make sense. Because if that was true, then every single time I flare and I go on prednisone and I come off, I'm going to flare again. If I'm flaring on it now, I am for sure going to be able to flare on it in the future. So that's ridiculous. No, that's just putting me at more risk. And I told him that I wanted to switch medications. He was like, well, that's not really how I see it. You know, that whole situation of me being on prednisone and Humira. He didn't, I don't know. I don't even know what he was thinking, quite frankly. But I didn't agree with it. So the only other injectable medication that people with colitis can do is the Stelara. The first one is an infusion, and then you inject every 8 weeks instead of like every 2 that I was doing with the Humira. And I guess he said that the Stelara is like the superior drug for people with colitis and keeps them in remission the most, which I wanted to be like, then why are you arguing against it? Because it just makes more sense to do if I'm already flaring on the Humira. And then after that, unfortunately, if for some reason I fail Stelara, then I have to go back to infusions. I am getting my first infusion for the Stelara at the infusion center that I trust, that was able to get me a few years ago. They have no problems poking me. They always get me on the first try, and I love that infusion center so much. So that's where my first infusion is going to be. I was really surprised that Cigna approved that. However, they did. They're still trying to get my maintenance dosing approved. And then after that, I have to, like, not get the infusion until I've been off Humira for 4 weeks, and then I can get the infusion. So until I can schedule that, they want me to continue taking the Humira. However, I did it last week, so if I can get it scheduled in another week or 2, I'll be all set. It'll be perfect, and I won't have to do the Humira. But that's where I'm currently at. The problem with having colitis versus Crohn's is that there's a lot more treatment options out there for Crohn's. A lot more injectable options, a lot more things that Crohn's responds to versus colitis. And there are a lot, just in general, there are a lot more like injections versus infusions. Once I'm on Stelara. God forbid I flare on that one and I technically fail it. I'm kind of stuck doing infusions unless they develop a new one, and they're constantly developing new ones and biosimilars. Even if the doctor wanted me to go back on Remicade, Cigna wouldn't approve it, so it wouldn't really matter. That's where I'm at right now. So I'm still on steroids trying to get out of this flare, and then hopefully the steroids are going to bridge me into starting Stelara, or Stelara, however you want to say it. I say Stelara. But I want to share with you guys what that experience is like and show that on here. The more education and awareness that I can get out, the better, in my opinion. But that's where I'm at right now. I will bring you guys to the infusion. However, I'm going to bring my GoPro. Oops, someone's texting me. I'm going to bring my GoPro like in the car, and then once I'm in the infusion center, since it is an infusion center it's a ginormous one, and it's also for people who are there for oncology and hematology purposes, I'm only gonna like film on my phone, and I don't think I'm gonna talk unless there's like literally no one around me. But that's where I'm at, and it kind of sucks. I was really liking Humira. I felt better on Humira. I was having like gas pain with Remicade, even though I wasn't flaring, I was still having that pain. And now the doctor wants to argue that like, oh, well, the Remicade was working. You showed on a colonoscopy that it was working. And I was like, well, sir, this is what my colitis does. Every 3-4 years, for some reason, I go into a flare. I've been almost 4 years out of college. It kind of just makes sense. I don't even know if the Remicade was working. I could have flared on the Remicade for all we know, which is kind of the sucky part of it. However, we are going to prove, once I start the Stelara 6 months out, that it's working by colonoscopy and see if at the cellular level I still have disease or not. I think we'll just go from there based off of like what we're going to do for treatment. Of course, I hope it's working by then. If not, I might have to switch to infusions, but we will see. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.